let me introduce you. I'm very happy to introduce you to Professor Jana S. Rošker, who is a professor at the University of Ljubljana, Faculty of Arts, Department of Asian Studies. She is one of the founders of our department, and this year we are celebrating 30 years of establishment of our department. We are really proud of our department, of course, Professor Jana Rošker. She is professor of sinology, and she's also research counselor, head of the National Research Program Asian Language and Cultures. Her subject areas are Chinese and comparative philosophy, methodology of transcultural research. Her current research topics are researching methodology of transcultural research in the field of East Asian philosophies and developing a new method denoted transcultural philosophical sublation. And she wrote a lot of books and articles. She's a very productive writer on the topic of Chinese philosophy and comparative philosophy, and you can a lot of her articles and books around the world as well. So today's lecture will be on sublating Confucian relationism towards a new planetary ethics. Please welcome, and there will be a lecture, and after lecture please think about the questions, the topics you are interested in, and please ask the questions. Yes. Thank you so much. Yeah, welcome.
Hvala lepa, lepo pozdravljeni, veseli me, da ste se zbrali v tako velikem številu, in ker gre tukaj za mednarodno predavanje, na katerem so tudi mednarodni študenti in študentke, bom seveda priklopila na lingvo franco akademskega življenja, in to je angleščina. So welcome, I'm very glad that I have so many, such a numerous audience, and I'm also very, very glad to be able to deliver a short speech in the framework of this important Eurasia project. And I would also like to use this opportunity first to thank the organizers of this series of lectures, which I see as a very important contribution to the solving of the world and humanity. So I would like to first of all to thank Professor Chikako Shigemori Buchar, who is a kind of initiator of this series of lectures, and of course especially to my dear colleague and friend Professor Natasha Vysochnik-Gergely for inviting me. So thank you very much. Okay, but without further ado, let's delve into today's topic. So because this whole project, this whole series of lectures is about the answers, the reactions of East Asian regions to the challenges of the global time or contemporary globalized time. I have chosen a lecture which is also connected, a topic which is also connected to these questions. I would like to see whether there is a possibility to integrate certain positive aspects of Confucian relational ethics into the framework of a new universal ethics, which is something we all desperately need at the present moment, in my opinion. So, and I will also, in the process of introducing to you these different possibilities of this integration, I will also very shortly and briefly introduce the method I am developing in recent years. It is a dialectical method called the method of transcultural philosophical sublation. Okay, let's see what this is about. Yeah. Me and technology. I think that this has we have to stop this thing and then. Yeah, I think we will. Yeah. Okay. So when we begin at the original question of this that connects all these presentations, all these speeches in this series of Eurasia, we all know that we are confronted in our life with several very precarious, very dangerous crises, such as climate catastrophes, viral pandemics, unequal distribution of wealth that leads to sustaining poverty and hunger in the world. Then we cannot forget, of course, one of the major issues we have been confronted with lately. These are the many aggressive military conflicts and wars. And all these crises actually are not are interconnected, as we all know. They are interconnected. They are globalized. They are global crises. In fact, which means that they cannot be resolved in the narrow confines of individual nation states. So they demand that we all cooperate as parts of humanity, as human beings who need to start build an awareness of being together. That these problems are problems that are not problems of other people. They really very tightly and intimately connect each and all of us. So in such a situation, when we need really to listen to each other, to cooperate, to show some solidarity with other people, with other cultures, with other nations who are maybe confronting even this crisis more directly, like in Ukraine, like in Gaza, many other areas in the world, we need to establish an intercultural dialogue. And this intercultural dialogue must not remain limited to questions of logistic and strategic and economic and political solution. We also need to establish a dialogue where we exchange knowledge, ideas, ethical systems that were developed in very different traditions, in very different parts of the world. This is very important. And so, being a sinology, of course, my task is, in this regard, to try to find what are the aspects of the Chinese or Eastern Asian tradition that could contribute to the resolving of this crisis through becoming a part of a new universal ethics. Because we really desperately need a new ethos, because the ethos that is guiding our lives today, I think, at least myself, I'm very skeptical about it, and I believe that many of you also share this opinion. So I think that the Confucian relational ethics, which has in different historical periods influenced a lot of East Asian society, has much to offer to this new universal or planetary, as we will see, ethics. Because it is the central virtue on which this relational ethics is based, is the virtue of the so-called co-humanness, or ren in Chinese, ren in Chinese. Ren is a virtue that can be understood already, its essence can be understood if we look at the character with which it is written. This Chinese character is composed of two parts. This is the left part and this is the right part. And the left part has the meaning of a human being, an individual human being. The right part, however, is the number 2. It expresses plurality. And the character as such, taken together, means that every human being can only survive together with other human beings, right? We cannot, no human being is an island, we are all interdependent. And this is why this elementary virtue of Confucian relational ethics is a very useful virtue for today's world, because we need to build, as I mentioned, an awareness that we are in all this shit, pardon my French, that we are all together in this problematic situation, right? So how now, before I try to show in which way this Confucian ethics could be integrated in this new universal ethics, I would just like to warn a little bit that the universal ethics as such is also dangerous in many respects. It can be connected to cultural imperialism, to dogmatism. It can exclude many marginalized ideas and ideational systems. It can lead to ethical paradoxes. It can be manipulated by people in power who define what is actually the universal ethics, and it can undermine moral pluralism. But scrutinizing these dangers of the universal ethics also highlights the dangers of its opposite approach, namely the extreme ethical relativism. Because extreme ethical relativism is likewise very dangerous. It can lead to moral paralysis, because you have many different ethical opinions and you just cannot, they're all allowed, why should you choose one of them? So this is moral paralysis. It can lead to justification of injustice, right? If we think about the clitoris amputation in some parts of Africa, and they can legitimize that by saying, well, this is our cultural value, right? Then it can also be ideologically misused. It can lead to a fragmentation of social cohesion, to contradictions, to incoherence, and also moral exploitation. So when we try to find a way to establish a new ethics for humanity, a new planetary ethics, I will go into this planetary issue in a moment, then we need to navigate somehow between the Scylla and Charybdis of extreme universal ethics and extreme ethical relativisms. So now I have just said that what we are confronting today are global. The crises we are confronting are global in their very nature. And so we could say, well, if we seek for a solution in a new ethics that could replace the old ethics or whatever, then it should be a new global ethics. However, I am not speaking about a new global ethics. I am speaking about a new planetary ethics. I assume here an idea, a notion that was established, that was developed by Gayatri Chakraborty Spivak, who is a very well-known theoretician of post-colonial studies. And what she says is that that today's globalization is actually a system of interconnections that is based on economic interests, on political interests only. So it is a system that does not care about the ideas which underpin these interconnections. It is just about the accumulation of profit and accumulation of wealth guided by a certain type of power dynamics, guided by people who are, or elites who are in power. So she, in her book, That of a Discipline, she has proposed, on the basis of this critique of globalization, she has proposed an ethical alternative, and she called it planetarism. Planetarism is, of course, based on decolonizing knowledge and humanities. It is also a notion, it is a concept that goes beyond identity policies and nationalisms. Okay, she also says, and I fully agree, that the alternative planetary ethics should be free from post-colonial relicts of Eurocentrism and Orientalism. Now, many people might ask, how can we actually talk about Eurocentric elements in global communications and interactions when we all know how unimportant Europe is at the moment in the geopolitical sense, right? It has no, it is becoming more and more unimportant if you follow now the latest developments at this Munich conference, security conference. I mean, Europe is off the table already in all important issues where really world matters, the matters of the world should be decided. So why are we still, when we, and of course Eastern Asia, China, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, they are much more important. They are rising, right? And Europe is declining. But so why are we still talking about, well, this is Eurocentrism is something that guides all the interactions in science and humanities still in the entire world. This is because today's globalization is structurally connected. The origins of today's globalization are rooted in the Industrial Revolution in Europe, which brought about a shift of explosive development of technology and also know-how connected to this technology, and which brought about a new economic system of capitalism. And this capital, this advanced technology was subsequently spread over the entire world, over all the new non-European regions through the processes of colonialization. And in these processes, of course, in these processes, it was not only about exporting capital, exporting technology, exporting capitalism. It was also about exporting ideational systems which underlie this kind of economy. It is a certain type of axiology which is still dominating the entire world. The values of global interactions are still European values, and this makes it somehow a bit difficult to establish an equal discussion between different parts of the world. So, Gayatri Spivak, I just mentioned her book, that of the discipline, and the discipline she had in mind was the discipline of comparative literature. She said, well, comparative literature as it is today, in its today's form, is full of Eurocentric biases and norms and standards and so on. So she said, the comparative literature, the world literature, should either transform itself or it will be killed because it is too outdated, and hence the title Death of the Discipline. So the same, of course, applies to all comparative approaches in transcultural discourses. The classical model, the classical theoretical model of comparisons is not very suitable to implement, cheers, to implement intercultural comparisons. Why? Let's take a look to this basic model, how it is structured. Right? There is many scholars who deal in their work with intercultural comparisons. For instance, in my field, in comparative philosophy, they said, well, intercultural philosophy is very difficult to implement because we are dealing with only one philosophical language, not only in the sense of terminology, but also with the conceptual apparatus and so on. And one single methodology, philosophical methodology, and then we applied it on culturally diverse regions and discourses. Of course, this is a problem, but in my view, this problem goes further. Why? Because this one single philosophical language and this one single philosophical methodology is actually a methodology that was shaped and developed in Europe, or later on also in Euro-America, in the West, so to say. And we can see that from this, we can see that very clearly if we observe this basic theoretical model of comparison. Each comparison must be composed of at least two objects of comparison, right? They are called comparatum, two comparata, and then we have an external element which is outside, which has to be outside of this comparata. This is the so-called third of comparison, or in Latin, it sounds much more noble, tertium comparationis. Now, the problem is that this tertium comparationis provide us the criteria of evaluation when we compare these two comparata. It also provides us the entire methodology, of how we go along with this comparison. It provides us with the basic values of what is good, what is bad, what is beautiful, what is ugly, and so on. So, and the problem is that in intercultural, in transcultural research, this comparison, this tertium comparationis, is part actually of one of the two comparata, because it works with Western methodologies and with Western norms and standards, with Western evaluation criteria. So this is somehow a problem which shows that intercultural comparisons in the field of philosophy, also literary theory, anthropology, what kind of sociology and so on, it is very difficult to establish a really objective kind of comparison. It is, in this scheme, it is practically impossible. So, these problems have led many scholars to seek for new methods of intercultural comparison. There are many valuable contributions being made to the solution of this problem by different scholars who are dealing with those issues. And I have also developed a new method, which, at least for myself and for people who are working in a similar way that I do, is quite workable. It is called the transcultural sublation method. Now, sublation comes from Hegelian dialectics, but this method has not much to do, although Hegel also uses this term, sublation, Aufhebung. In German, sublation is important for this method because it has three connotations. One is eliminate, one is to preserve, and the third one is rise, a rise from a lower level to a higher level. But this is everything that this method has in common with Hegel. Although this is also a dialectical method, it is not based, as the Hegelian dialectic, on the three basic laws of the European basic logic: the law of identity, the law of contradiction, and the law of the excluded middle. Instead, it is based on something very different. It is guided by the principle of the so-called correlative complementarity, which goes back to the ancient Chinese book of changes, and which was also a part of most, let's say, mainstream East Asian theoretical discourses. So, and it works in 8 phases. I will first just tell you very shortly these phases. First, we formulate a relational research question. Why must the research question be relational? If we are comparing transcultural philosophies, this is important. This is especially important because we cannot compare single concepts. Single concepts are too context bounded, so their connotations, their meaning change too quickly. This will be a very unreliable thing to compare. But if we compare a relation between two concepts, for instance, how is the relation between good and evil being dealt with in this philosophy and in that philosophy, it is a much more stable category and therefore a better tool for establishing comparison. Okay, this is the first phase. Then we look for similarities in how these two comparata deal with the research question. In the third stage or phase, we look for differences, but not differences between these two comparata, but the differences that can be found in the similarities. I will explain this further a little bit later on the concrete example. Then the fourth step is we connect these differences to the respective frameworks of reference. This is to the respective semantic systems in which these two comparata are embedded. In the fifth phase, we identify flaws or shortcomings of both comparata. In the sixth phase, we establish a mutual complementarity between the two comparata. In the seventh, there is a sublation, as a shift, as a new perspective, which leads to the final eighth stage, in which we obtain a new idea regarding this research question. So now we try to sublate traditional Confucian ethics and to integrate it into the framework of a new universal planetary ethics. So how shall we try to proceed? First of all, I would say that what is really important is that this does not mean that we take these positive aspects of the Confucian ethics and put it into the framework of this new planetary ethics and we delete everything which was part of the universal ethics with Herder. This is of course not true, because today's universal ethics, it is far from perfect, but it also contains many elements that are very important, that are an important legacy of humanity, such as free will, a free subject, autonomy, critical thinking, and so on. All these Western European Enlightenment values have to be preserved and developed in this new planetary ethics. They must not be deleted, so some new Confucian relational ethics can come into it. No, they have to be combined with one another, right? Okay, now when we want to integrate Confucian relational ethics into the framework of the new planetary ethics, we are very soon confronted with the question, okay, but which Confucianism? Because Confucianism is not a monolithic ideational building. Most of the scholars who really deal with Confucian ethics or with Confucianism as such, most sociologists, historians, anthropologists, whoever deals with contemporary China, then they have to deal with Confucianism also, if you go a little bit into depth, because there are still relics that still, in this or another way, somehow influence contemporary East Asian societies. But all these scholars, they very quick discover that it is really difficult to take Confucianism as a category because it is so diverse. On the one hand, we have Confucianism, which is very conservative, very reactionary, very hierarchical, rigid hierarchy, then oppressing, the youth, oppressing the women, and so on. A very rigid, conservative, reactionary form of Confucianism. But then we also have Confucianism, which is very liberating, which respects the other, which is very pluralistic, which actually fosters critical thinking, and so on. So most historians and sociologists, they ask themselves, well, how is this possible? How could we somehow connect this Confucian contradiction between social mobility on the one side and this rigid hierarchy on the other? So they are seeking for something that would connect, that is common to all these diverse kinds of Confucianism. And Johan Arnason, a very important sociologist from Iceland, he is part of this Nordic group of sociologists, has called this meta-Confucian pattern. So if you want to use Confucianism as a category, we need to find a meta-Confucian pattern. And the same is for us. If we want to integrate elements of Confucian ethics into the framework of new planetary ethic, this watch is too quick. Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay. Then we need first to establish which kind of Confucianism are we talking about. What is our meta-Confucian pattern in this regard, right? So let's see, and we will the analysis of classical sources has shown that, of course, there are many different kinds of Confucianism, but in essence, in the conceptual sense, they are two that are really, really important and very distinct from each other. This is only on the conceptual level, right, as categories. Not in real life. Of course, in real life, the borderlines between all these Confucianisms are very blurred, right, and they are very diverse and so on. But we have two kinds of Confucianism, which are called in sinology political Confucianism and philosophical Confucianism. Now, the philosophical Confucianism was first. It was established in the Zhou dynasty in the 5th century BC by Confucius. It was for the time a very progressive philosophy or ethics, very progressive, including some germs of democracy, also based on solidarity, equal relations, and so on. A very progressive teaching. And then in the Han Dynasty, it was for many reasons into which I will not go now, because it will take too much time. In the Han Dynasty, China needed a new state doctrine, and they took Confucianism, and in a very subtle, latent way, they merged it with legalism, which was another philosophy, another doctrine that was very Machiavellistic, very autocratic, which served to the interests of the absolute ruler. So it was an ideology that was very suitable for dictatorships, for totalitarian states, right? And it was somehow integrated into Confucianism, so this new state doctrine, although in essence it was a legalist state doctrine, it still carried the name of Confucianism, and it also overtook many Confucian elements. So these are these two comparata also, which we are going to sublate now. So in the first phase, we establish a relational research question. This research question is basically, how is the relation between individual and society in both of these comparata, political state doctrine Confucianism and philosophical Confucianism? Next step, we identify similarities in both comparata. How do these two comparata deal with our research question, individual and society? There are many similarities, but I have focused upon three that I really regard as very significant. So the first similarity is they both place a lot of emphasis on social harmony. The second one is that they both cherish hierarchical relationships. And the third one, they both place emphasis on the importance of individual cultivation of moral virtues. Each individual must cultivate its own moral self in order to achieve social stability. Then in the next phase, we we look for differences in these similarities, not differences between the two comparata, but differences within these similarities we have just identified, right? So why is this important? Because it shows us that similarities are very often very superficial. They are just apparent. Because although we can find we can identify these similarities, we will see that both comparata have approached these similarities through a very different angle, from a very different approach, which means that actually the meaning of what is apparent similar is completely different still. These apparent similarities have still very different functions and very different implications in concrete life. So let's look at harmony. The ethical philosophical Confucianism emphasized harmony in terms of diversity. Harmony is only possible if there are different opinions, if there are different unique individuals contributing to. Because if you only have one melody, this is not a harmonic. This is not harmony. You need many different voices. Political Confucianism, on the other hand, defines harmony. This is also today the case in the People's Republic of China, at least, as unity, as unification, as a collective enhancement of the state. Then the second difference, regards hierarchy. In political Confucianism, there are clear distinctions between higher and lower positions and function. They say that all the sources talk about very clearly that this distinction is very important, otherwise there will be chaos. We need to know who is above and who is below, and so on. This is very important. But in philosophical Confucianism, the hierarchy is understood in a completely different way. It is, first of all, it is not based on the absolute obedience of the lower element and the absolute power of the one above, of the superior, but it is based on the demand of responsibility of the superior towards their people. This responsibility is most important, and also the philosophical Confucianism is based on 5 canonical relations, which are actually also not hierarchical in this sense that we understand hierarchy, but it is always based on these relationships are always based on a certain virtue which is connected to human emotions. So we have 5 such relationships. First is the relationship between ruler and subject, and the virtue on which it has to be based is the virtue of justice. So it is important that they both contribute to a just society, and especially for the ruler, it is important that he is a just ruler and that he is responsible to his people. This is, of course, in the philosophical theory. It is like it was very, very rare the case in Chinese history or in East Asian history. Then the second relationship is parents-children. It is also a hierarchical relationship which is based on the emotion of familial affection and love. But of course it is hierarchical because parents have the saying and children not. Because why? Because children are still dependent, young children are dependent from the parents, and of course the parents will decide what happens in the family. The third one is the relationship between men and women. It is not hierarchical at all. It is only based on difference. They say it is important that this relation, husband and wife, that they are different, which relates actually to the gender-based division of labor in the society. The fourth relation is the one that is really, really the only one for which I would say that it is really hierarchical. And this is the relation between the elderly and the young. The elder generations and the young generations. This is really a hierarchical, the only one rigid hierarchical relationship which is based on the virtue of proper order somehow. So, which means that the elderly is always has priority, not the younger ones. And of course, this relation has also led to gerontocracy in the Chinese and Korean, and I don't know about Japanese history, but we still have the phenomenon of gerontocracy in today's East Asian society, and it is not such a good thing. Although we must also know that this Confucian philosophy was established in a time when people just didn't care about the elderly, right? You were old and then you could go and die somewhere. Right? So they needed something to enhance the position, to establish a moral human awareness that old people are also people and they have cared for you when you were little and now you have to care for them because they're old. Okay, so, but anyhow, these two types of hierarchy are also very, very different. I would say there is a difference within this apparent similarity. And this is the third similarity. We have already established that both of these comparata, political and philosophical Confucianism, both emphasize very much the moral cultivation of the individual. But then this moral cultivation again is based on completely different understandings of what is moral cultivation about. Of course, we all need to be good. Now, this is moral. If we are good, then we are morally cultivated, moral self. But in philosophical Confucianism, which follows Mencius, this goodness is part of our inborn qualities. So each human being in general is good. So if you want to cultivate goodness, virtues, then we just have to listen to ourselves and to develop what we already have in us in germs. Yeah? We just need to overcome some occasional egoistic inclinations that come into us from outside. But in ourselves we have this moral compass, we are all good. We just have to develop ourselves, and then we are morally cultivated. In political Confucianism, the thing is, the opposite is true. This is based on Xunzi, who believed that virtue is not innate. We are all born very evil, or bad at least. We are all born very egocentric, and if nobody would work on us, we would just go after our own very egocentric interests, and we would not care about other people at all. So, if we want to cultivate our virtues in this context, this is something that is imposed into us from outside. If you want to cultivate moral cultivation, then we need some discipline from outside to come and to cultivate us. So this third similarity, as we have seen, is also actually only an apparent similarity, because actually it is a very different thing that lies behind. Now in the next phase we try to connect all these differences that we have just identified to the two respective frameworks of reference. These are, as I mentioned, semantic networks that define each system of thought. So philosophical Confucianism is rooted in a network that is based on the importance of personal moral development. It places also a strong emphasis on deontological ethics, similar to the Kantian Enlightenment ethics. We need to fulfill certain obligations to other people, to society, and so on. Then the state doctrine, the political Confucianism, is more aligned. This network is actually being established to enhance paradigms centered on power dynamics and also social control. So we have a very autocratic framework of reference on the one side, and then we have some framework of reference which is exaggeratedly moral, just obsessed with morality, as if morality would be everything. We know that this is not true. There are many other very pleasant things in this world. Now we can, on this basis of referential framework, we can establish insufficiencies or flaws that can be found in both comparata. Right? If we look first of this is philosophical Confucianism, what is the flaw, the insufficiency? It's neglect of addressing issues related to political power and to social injustice. So, in other words, it is very apolitical. It is completely apolitical. It is just obsessed with morality. This is not enough, right? And political Confucianism, it also had flaws which are, in my view, even more dangerous, maybe, because it stifles individual autonomy. It can justify authoritarian governance and so on. So both of these kinds of Confucianism or of Confucian ethics have some flaws, some insufficiencies. So now, in the next step, we shall try to establish mutually complementary relations between these two comparata, right? How are we going to do that? We have just defined insufficiencies and flaws. We will delete these insufficiencies and we will preserve in both comparata the positive aspects, right? These are the two basic connotations of the term sublation. Something needs to be deleted, something needs to be preserved. So we preserve the strength, we eliminate the flaws, and then we take the strengths of each comparata and try to fulfill, to complete these gaps that occurred because we have eliminated the flaws, or the insufficiency. And so philosophical Confucianism can, of course, complete the political Confucianism's exaggerate focus on governance, which means that we can come to a model of leadership rooted in moral integrity. But the practicality that is inherent in political Confucianism is also important, and it can ground or complement this exaggerate focus on morality, and it can ground somehow the often very abstract ideas of philosophical Confucianism. So they can complement each other. Then the next phase is the phase of sublation in the narrow sense, which means sublation as a shift. Why there is a shift? Because in these previous 6 phases of the sublation process, there was a tension was accumulating between the two comparata in the process of their interaction. So this tension now brings our thought to shift. We can suddenly see or not see, but in my case I always saw something in all the examples where I demonstrated the sublation method, we see this basic research question from a completely new perspective. And this new perspective is, well, we have seen how these two comparata have complemented each other, and what came out was a governance model that is not only ethically informed, morally informed, but also efficient. So, and in the 8 phases, this is the new idea that emerges from this dialectical relation. But this, if you say, okay, we have now this model of governance that is ethically informed and also efficient, this is actually something that is nothing new, because this is just the ideal model of meritocratic government, which is part of the Chinese propaganda for centuries already, and also today. So this is actually nothing new. But what emerges as a new idea is when we really want to go beyond all these ideologies of a meritocratic governance, we need actually a new focus, and this new focus can be provided by, if we look again into the traditional discourses. We can find now that these two distant comparata, which we have compared to each other, are manifesting themselves in a traditional Confucian binary, what I call binary category, because it is a category based on opposites, of the so-called inner sage and external ruler. These are two categories that work together, and they are actually a manifestation of our inner self. They are a manifestation of each self, of each human being has a double self. One is this our own intimate morality, and the second one is the so-called empirical subject, how we are to other people, how we are towards politics, how we deal with political and personal relationships. This is called external ruler. And if you want to develop this meta-compute, that is also the answer to the research question, if you want to develop this meta-Confucian pattern, then we need to go into these traditional categories, and we need to study the theories of the so-called voices of the affected. What have the Chinese, the East Asian scholars themselves really had to say to this issue of a meta-Confucian pattern? Because nowadays in the academia, also in the academia that is dealing with Chinese or East Asian studies, we mostly and much too much rely to Western sources. We should include the voices of the affected. And in this way, this is actually what came out is more or less orientation for further research. We need to include much more the theories that were written, that were shaped, that were developed by East Asian scholars themselves. So, and this applies not only to the contents of their studies, but also, and perhaps even more importantly, to their theoretical and conceptual frameworks. So, and in this way, I would like to conclude with a humble hope that it is still not too late, to integrate some other, not only elements of Confucian relational ethics, but also from some contributions for other cultures into this new planetary ethics. I hope it is still not too late. And the task, the agenda that is in foreground here is that we have to work on integrating these positive elements of ethics from other cultures into education, into legislation, and into international diplomacy. So with this humble hope, I would like to conclude today's lecture. I would also like to thank all of you for your patient listening and to open the floor for your comments, critiques, and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much from my side as well, Professor Jana Roschker, and I would really like to ask you for the questions, comments on this topic. It's a very interesting topic. What do you think? Is it this possible that we can still implement these ideas, positive ideas, into our contemporary world, society? What do you think? Yes, please. Any ideas?
We need to wait.
Yes? Yes, please.
I might ask, since we need to create a new metaphor that philosophy, we need to emit some on both sides. But who will decide which is good for the meta? This is my question.
Yeah, where is actually the external factor that decides which norms and which standards are to be overtaken, right? Yeah, this is a very good question. This is also a question that has been very often, by which very often the Gayatri Spivak school system or alternative was criticized or taken into questions, that after all we still need somebody to decide what is actually efficient, what is inefficient, and so on. And the critique went into the direction that her system of Planetary lacks this concrete, that it is very theoretical and it lacks this concrete implementation. But I think that we actually maybe do not need some normative decisions about what has to be implemented and what has to be deleted. I think that that is why I have also exposed this Confucian virtue, basic virtue of Ren, co-humanness, because it is an awareness of empathy, that we need empathy to each other. It is an awareness that we must be solidaric to each other. And I think that on this basis we are very far away from this kind of awareness in today's societies, right? And I think that if we would really succeed to raise this kind of awareness, I'm afraid this would take some generations, not only some years, but some generations, then we could establish a system where actually the problems could be solved on the basis of this awareness. We all know that liberal democracy has its flaws. It is, especially when it is connected to the current economic system, it has a lot of flaws, but all the other alternatives actually don't really work either. So I am also a little bit concerned in this regard. For instance, when I was younger, I was very much advocating something that today's this new progressive European party, Mira 25, is advocating, namely a schema of direct democracy, where these issues would be decided very directly. or maybe Swiss is already a little bit close to such a system. But now I'm very skeptical to this system as well, because if I see, for instance, in this some underdeveloped regions of Slovenia, or not underdeveloped, even developed regions like Dolenska, how they treat the Roman people. If we would leave them direct democracy to decide what to do with the Roma minority, they would kill all of them, or at least, I mean, throw them out of the country or something. So this is actually, and also this enlightened Swiss democracy with the referendums and everything. I mean, then they go and forbid, you know, minorities like Islamic girls that they cannot wear chador in school. So this is not really an alternative also. So if you ask me now, yeah, how would this system look? Where would we politically put, you know, this arbitrary position of deciding? I think this should be made very situational, it should be very context dependent, but it should be, first of all, based on this interhuman solidarity and co-humanness. This is, yeah. It is not practically realizable in the next 3 years, I know, but I think this is a direction in which to work for now.
Yes, any other questions? Comments?
Critiques? Constructive
Yes.
critiques. This was actually a kind of a constructive critique also, I would say, right? And it is very well grounded, right? But it is actually also a critique of, it's just like saying, yeah, we maybe cannot really solve the world or humanity in this way, right? So some more questions, remarks?
Do you have any other ideas?
Yeah,
alternative ideas of how to save the world. Maybe just, yeah. From any other countries.
I have kind of question, comment, I'm not sure myself, but I feel like in today's world, people are starting to reject again intercultural. So, and now we're talking about transcultural, because like watching in the Europe, people are starting, oh, you let the other minorities in, look what is happening. So even though we had this shift the last 10-20 years when people were opening to other minorities, now they're closing again.
Yes.
So they're starting to reject interculturality. So do you think they would be open to this other idea of which is transcultural?
Yeah, you are of course completely right. We are closing up. We can see that what is Trump doing with migrations. We can Europe is going into the same direction, maybe more slowly, but very decisively. It started with Hungary. Our own country is not very high on this level. Also, Germany starts to reconsider because it is in crisis, and of course, all these influences has a very negative impact on what I was talking about, the awareness that we are all in the same boat, because people see other people which are not part of their nationality or who look differently more as enemies, and it is very difficult. So this is actually connected to what I said. To achieve this openness, we should first somehow achieve this new awareness of a planetary situation, that we are all interconnected, and that we just need to work together. And this is actually the thing with which I with which I completed, I finished my presentation, my lecture. It is, I think we need to work in the areas of education and in legislation. This is, I think education is the only way. But the problem is, of course, that the crises are very pressing, and we don't have a lot of time, and we don't have time, to educate one whole or two more generations. Yeah. We need ad hoc solutions, and this is a very precarious question, I think, because I'm a very optimistic kind of person, but I just don't see any ad hoc solutions to this situation, because it is developing from bad to worse each day almost. Yeah, sorry not to give you a more optimistic answer about this.
Yes, idea of this problem. Yes? More?
No?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked about that we need to work together. What do you do when we have communities who don't want to work together? Because
I think most of it is also connected to what we were just discussing. I think that most of the communities don't want to work together in the present situation, because maybe it is also a kind of human psychology. If you are in a crisis-defined situation, you always first think of yourself and then of the people around you, and you need some kind of positive identity to which you can rely, and everybody who is outside of this identity is basically an enemy. And you don't work together with enemies, you are in competition with enemies.
Regarding the Roma population in the Dolenska region, I'm from Kočevje, and I spent 3 years of my life living among them, in their community. And the problem is they don't integrate.
They are very, very difficult to integrate, but I'm on the other hand from Prekmurje. We also have this community of Roma population, and I don't think that the Romas in Prekmurje are per se very different from the Romas in Dolenska, but the process started when I was a kid, and now they live in a very normal village with a very normal infrastructure. Most of them are employed. You have university graduates among them, and they lead a life that is very integrated actually, whereby they have preserved their own folkloristic rituality. They have also preserved their language. They have their own radio station. So I didn't, please don't misunderstand me, I didn't want to say something bad about the population in Dolenska. I have a lot of friends among Dolenska people, but I was talking about the phenomenon. That is
why are the Roma people, Prekmurje, so integrated now?
Because the policy was different. I think that the main reason is that the communal policy was different, and the communal administration has educated the people of not to be so discriminated. I can still remember when I was a kid, they were still throwing stones behind us. They were also not. It was a process. It was not something that happens from today to tomorrow, but it is a difficult process also. But once they have this trust that they started, how they started in Prekmurje? They started by building up kindergartens in their village. They started by building basic medical care there, and then they started. Then they had also more rigid sanctions, like if you don't send your kids into the school, you don't get the money. Yeah, this was all these things together, right? But it is. I didn't bring up this example to say, oh, how horrible the people from Dolenska are. I just thought that people who don't have this kind of awareness yet, that they would decide against these minorities. This is not only the Roma. We have this issue with homosexuals also in the whole Slovenia. Any kind of minority is oppressed if we establish this kind of direct democracy. It works only with very educated people who are very aware of that we are really all connected. Yeah.
Interesting. Now we have a case study. Yes,
this is a case study.
Two case studies we can compare. Yes.
That would be very. I'm actually. I'm very much wondering why nobody did that.
Yes.
Because there is such a big difference between the Romas in Prekmurje and the Romas in Dolenska. That could be a great.
How did they even manage to build all those facilities in their villages? Like, did they not protest?
Who paid for it?
No, they were happy.
Really?
Yeah, they were happy. I mean, every community is happy if you give it basic medical care.
No,
or kindergarten.
Not the Roma people, but the people around them.
They are quite isolated from, that there is Murska Sobota,
Okay.
this town, and then you have a small stream and a bridge, and they were quite isolated. They were not in the center.
So basically the plan is to isolate and put them
No.
village.
No, they have settled there by themselves.
It was already their settlement.
Their settlement was a kind of village on the margins of the
Who
town.
paid for those facilities being built?
The community, the local government. Yeah, this is also important, right? The local government, of course.
And the people from that region, normal people, didn't protest that?
No. As far as I know, they were okay. They were okay because the problems became lesser. It was also good for them. You give those Romas a little bit something and then they don't make so many problems. And there were less robberies, there were less, social conflicts gradually. I can remember when I was very little, the situation was very different as compared to when I graduated from high school. This was like day and night.
I know that in Krško they're also accepting Roma people, but they aren't seeing much improvement. They're causing trouble left and right from school. It's awful.
Yeah, I can remember in the beginning it was the same. So it is an issue of really very smart local politics, and then it can be solved.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. One big applause. Thank you also for Eurasia Foundation to fund all those lectures, of course, and we will see you next week on a very interesting lecture again. Thank you.